Hello, my name's Ed Bernardon, and I am the VP of Automotive Strategy at Siemens, and today I'm in the Midlands of England, home base to many of the F1 teams, and we are at the Whiteways Technical Center, which is the home of the Alpine Formula One team. If you've been watching Formula One this year, you've seen that it's a lot more competitive. The wheel-to-wheel racing is a lot closer, and that's all due to the new regulations that have actually had a big impact on the actual design of the car. And what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at how those regulations have made changes to the design by taking an up-close look at the 22 Alpine A522. And to help us do that, we are very, very lucky to have with us Bob Bell, who's a strategic advisor for Alpine. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Ed. Good to be here. Formula One cars are a very complex beast. You only have to look at one to realize the level of complexity of the aerodynamics. It's a relatively small vehicle, not the same size as an airliner, for example. It's heavily dependent on aerodynamics. It's very closely coupled. You know, a small change at the front can have a profound impact at the back. And so all the little details that you see on Formula One cars, they all matter and they all have an effect on this. So if you're going to do this job properly, you really have to do a ground-up look at how you design the car aerodynamically. You can't just say, well, all we're going to do is worry about the front wing, or all we'll do is worry about the rear wing. You've got to worry about all of it.
Racing has come a long way since the first Formula One event was held at Silverstone in 1950, but this year saw quite significant changes. I'm sure F1 fans have noticed that this year the sport has become a bit more competitive. New regulations have made a big impact on the sport. That's why we asked F1 expert Bob Bell to walk us through the regulation changes and how those new regulations impacted the design of the 2022 cars. But before we get our answers, I just want to illustrate how lucky we are to have this conversation with an expert like Bob by showcasing his Formula One background and history. You've had 36 years in Formula One. You were the technical director here when Alonso won the championship. Your team won the constructors' title. You were technical director for Mercedes. You worked at McLaren. Tell us a little bit about your career in Formula One, your experience in F1, and what you're doing now with Grid for Good.
I go way back in Formula One. I started in 1982 with McLaren, hot out of university, and was there for many years, 15, 16 years or so, originally starting as an aerodynamicist and working through the organization, running the R&D department, doing a lot of technology development, everything from bits on the cars to introducing the first CAD system into McLaren. Also did a sort of a sabbatical from F1 and for several years headed up a project to develop a supersonic land speed record car, which didn't come to fruition in the end for various reasons. So that was a great time, very formative years for Formula One and for me personally, so it was a real privilege to be there. And then I decided to go walkabout. So I left McLaren and came here to this site when it was under Bernardon ownership for a couple of years as an aerodynamicist, and then got itchy feet again. And of course, coming from Northern Ireland, I felt that no self-respecting Irishman could work in Formula One and not do a stint with Eddie Jordan. So I went over to Jordan for a couple of years as head of vehicle technology, and then got the call from Flavio to come back to what was then Renault. Renault had bought the team and came over as deputy technical director. Mike Gascoigne was the technical director at the time. He subsequently left and I took over. And then we had that wonderful series of years, as you say, culminating in 2005, 2006, where we won the double world championships. And I stayed here for several years after that, eventually sort of becoming managing director for the site here, and then got itchy feet again. went off to Mercedes for 3 years, again successfully culminating in the 2014 championship season for them, which was great. And then got the call to come back here again. So
Back to your home.
back to my home, my Enstone roots. So came back here as Chief Technical Officer for the team, with a sort of mandate to look both at Enstone and Ville-Châtillon in Paris, where we design and develop the engines. And did that for 3 or so years, and then finally reached a point where I thought, no, it's probably time to step back a little bit. So I agreed to stay on in an advisory capacity. And so I've been acting as a strategic advisor to the team for the last 3 years. And that's also given me time, because it's on a part-time basis, to do some things that aren't related to directly to the world of Formula One. And chief amongst those is a small charitable organisation I've set up called Grid for Good, with several of my colleagues in the world of motorsport. And basically we try and act as a link between people in other walks of life. They may be individuals, quite literally, or they may be organisations or other charities that have got some sort of problem or issue they don't have the resources to fix themselves. If we can help them source that resources, predominantly on a pro bono basis from within the world of motorsport, and we try and connect the solution provider to the person looking for a solution and help them. And we've done everything from getting some F1 PR agencies to update some small charities' branding to bring it more in line with what's expected these days, right the way through to helping create a tandem tricycle for a disabled child so he can go cycling with his family.
This year, we have seen big changes in Formula One. Regulation changes that drove changes in car design. But why change? What is the reasoning or motivation behind these new regulations? So big rule change, 22.
Yep.
Biggest change in decades,
Yep.
Complete, clean sheet, redesign of the car.
Yeah.
Why change the rules? What's the motivation behind that?
I think that was always going to see a change in how the sport was run and organised and the rules that govern it. Because Liberty had great plans for the future for F1, which are coming to fruition. They have done a really fantastic job. And I think they felt there were several things that were important to Formula One that they needed to get right, directly relate to the cars. And so obviously sporting spectacles important. You know, there were a lot of criticisms that Formula One was more of a procession, there wasn't enough overtaking and so on. So that was one
Get
element.
some real racing
Get some
going.
real wheel-to-wheel racing back, so there was that side of it. There was also the feeling that the sport was just beginning to cost too much. It wasn't sustainable, particularly for the smaller teams. So something had to be done about cost. There's the ever-present issue of safety. You know, we just need to keep the momentum going in developing these cars to become more and more safe.
But keeping the momentum going to improve the performance and safety of the cars becomes increasingly challenging from a design perspective when you suddenly need to start redesigning from a blank canvas.
My name is Dalia Ramos Guerra, and I'm the head of build and test in BWT Alpine F1 team. The car build for 2022 was actually a very, very challenging one. Most of the assemblies that we were making were completely new technologies, but also, most importantly, most of the tests were something completely unknown for us. We didn't know what to expect, and it was very exciting, but at the same time, it was a little bit scary because we didn't know if things were going to go perfectly fine as we were expecting. And for example, when we had the FIA homologation test, there was a lot of nervousness building up because we were going to have the FIA representatives looking at our chassis, looking at our car, and making sure that it's absolutely fine, and we didn't know what we were facing. It was a very challenging time, very long hours, but I think most importantly, everyone really enjoyed seeing the new car completely made and finally racing on the track.
Bob started his career fresh out of university as an aerodynamicist, and we all know that aerodynamics plays the main role in determining how well an F1 car slips through the air with the least resistance. Sometimes a design change that seems minor can have an impact that changes the outcome of a race.
The fact that Formula One cars, indeed many four-wheeled racing cars, generate a lot of what we call downforce, which pushes the car onto the ground and therefore enables it to go faster around a corner. The consequence of that is that you pay a drag penalty. And of course, there's always a trade-off to be had in designing the cars and running the cars between this force pushing it onto the track and this force trying to hold it back. Either way, you pay a drag penalty, and the drag penalty manifests itself in dirty air behind the car. And if another car gets into that dirty air, it's got less energy, and so it's less performant. You can extract less energy from it, and you lose performance in your car. Now, if it's just about drag, that's okay, actually, because the car in front sort of punches a hole in the air,
right.
and you can benefit. So that's drafting, and of course, you see that to great effect in Indianapolis and oval racing and so on. But one of the consequences is that it kills downforce on the car behind, and it kills downforce differently across the length of the car, typically killing more downforce at the front of the car than the rear. And of course, that upsets the balance of the car, how it feels to the driver, how hard he can push the car and expect to keep it under control.
The complexity of F1 engineering challenges closely resembles those that aerospace engineers face during their design processes, but with one distinct exception: deadlines.
I could say that F1 is quite similar to aerospace in some things. The technology, the components of the engines, and actually some of the jet engine components are very similar to the whole car in F1. So, strictly speaking, technology-wise, it's not that far away. But what is absolutely different is the pace that things move at. In aerospace, you always take your time to make sure that everything is going to be perfectly fine. And of course, we have delivery dates, but sometimes missing them is better than not being sure of what you are delivering. But in F1, you have no option. You still have to be safe. You still have to make sure that everything is perfect, but you just have to hit the date. You have to hit the track, because we know that we all are fighting for this championship, and all we want is to have the best car, but we needed to have it on time as well.
One of the most significant changes to the 2022 cars is the ground effect created by the 3D floor that increases downforce to help the car stick to the track. But what is the impact of this change, and why does it even matter?
You mentioned when ground effects was taken away, it was because of concern of having too much in the turns. Why would too much be a concern? Sounds like it would make things better.
The consequence of too much is that you go around the corner faster. So if you lose control of the car, and it's in a corner, you're most likely to lose control of the car. You're going to go off quicker, and you're going to cause yourself more injury. And it had got to the point where the drivers were actually struggling to keep their head position. There was so much lateral force acting on their helmet and head. It was a bit of an arms race to see who could develop the biggest neck muscles. That was deemed to be getting to the point where it was dangerous. And so ground effect was, to all intents and purposes, banned, or at least the geometry that produces it was banned. And we had the flat bottom era. So what we've done for 2022 with these cars is we've really introduced a degree of it. So it's very highly controlled. The geometry is pretty much fixed.
It's clear to see that a change in the regulations can be disruptive. But why? After adopting a new design to comply with these measures, would the FIA limit the testing time of cars?
Hi, I'm Luca Mazzocco and I'm Head of Partner Management here at BWT Alpine F1 team. Without really knowing, we have seen in the beginning of the season a lot of cars suffered from aerodynamic problems because of running very close to the ground. This is something that perhaps some teams had expected, maybe others less. It could only be resolved with experience. Nowadays we can't test very much. We only have pre-season testing sessions and then the tire sessions during the season. We use a lot of simulation in order to make up for the testing time we no longer have, because a few years ago all teams had extensive testing programs that were very expensive, and the FIA tried to block that because they really wanted to make the Formula One business model more viable even for the smaller teams.
In Formula One, driver safety is always a top concern. I asked Bob about new changes to cars to prevent post-collision fire.
Now, there's also been some changes that were made for safety. We all remember the crash that Grosjean had now 2-3 years ago, where the fuel cell was ruptured and there was a big fire. And on an F1 car, the power unit, the transmission, it's really the car. It's all the monocoques connected to that. And some new things have been done. What was done to increase the safety in that way?
These changes that specifically relate to safety, and particularly in the wake of an accident, they're happening on an ongoing basis. They weren't ever particularly baked into the 2022 rules as such. They are things that happen on a year-by-year basis, building on experience. So in the case of Grosjean's accident, of course, it showed that fuel cell can be ruptured, but of course, we knew that's always a possibility. You're never going to completely design that out. And details have been changed in the design of the fuel cell, the couplings where the fuel comes out of the tank. They're just a raft of detailed changes, structural and mechanical, that just make sure that it's less likely in the event of an accident again that there will be some sort of catastrophic failure or fuel leakage that could start a fire. When something like that happens, there is a very in-depth investigation done, and it won't just be mechanical or structural changes to the car. There will be a lot of changes introduced in how the safety teams respond and how the FIA manage the event when it happens. There's always a lot of lessons to be learned for the whole of the Formula One family, if you like, not just the way the fuel cell is designed.
Still, on the topic of driver safety, the 2022 cars were designed to absorb 15% more crash energy to better protect drivers. I needed to know how the designers managed to do this.
With carbon fiber and the monocoque, and really all the carbon fiber parts that are on the car, their ability to absorb energy when there is a crash.
Yeah.
And is what keeps the driver safe. You'll see an accident and then the driver walks away. And there's been an increase in the amount of energy that can actually be absorbed. I think it's like 15% or so. Now, how was that done? What changes were needed to be able to make it so that it could absorb that extra 15%?
Well, the biggest challenge actually is not designing a structure, and there's a structure on either side of the car, at the front here, that absorbs energy in a lateral impact with a barrier or with another car or with the circuit itself. The biggest challenge is making sure that those forces that are then transmitted into the chassis where the driver sits, that the chassis is in itself strong enough to resist them. So it's less a problem of designing something that will absorb energy, more about making sure the chassis is strong enough to withstand the forces involved in doing that. So the regulations for this year have seen a significant increase in the strength of the chassis, which is good because it allows us to absorb more energy, but it's just naturally a good thing if the chassis is stronger for any eventuality. Yeah, what we've talked about in terms of designing safer cars structurally, it's not a done job. It will continue as we move forward. The cars will get stronger and stronger and more able to absorb energy. And of course, that's great technology for everybody, because what we're pioneering here in the use of composite, you're going to start seeing in road cars.
Key to F1's speed and performance is the engine and exhaust. What impact did the new regulations have on the 2022 F1 engines?
One last thing on the back is the exhaust. There's some changes in the exhaust area as well. There's just a single exhaust this year.
There's the main pipe that you can see there. There's a wastegate pipe from the turbocharger feeding in. So not substantially different to what we had before, because the engines for this year are the same, pretty much the same engines as they have been since 2014. So no great changes there, other than those engines are now effectively frozen in specification until 2026. And you're not really supposed to be or allowed to change those engines without good reason, and the good reason has to be either reliability or cost saving. We're not really allowed to go looking for performance.
There are significant changes predicted for the future of F1, and one of the driving factors behind it is to make F1 more eco-friendly. That means changing the fuel and even the powertrain of the cars. What changes are currently on the map for F1 going forward in a world where the emphasis on sustainability is already strong and growing even stronger?
Next upgrade will be engines. And I think the current philosophy for that is a different distribution of internal combustion engine generated power versus electric power. So I think we'll see the balance move towards sort of 50-50, 50% electric, 50% internal combustion engine. And simplify the engines as well, perhaps remove one of the energy harvesting devices, possibly the one that's attached to the turbocharger, to reduce cost, make the engine simpler and more attractive to other engine manufacturers. And you'll also see continued and further use of biofuel content that I'm sure will grow. So yeah, I think that's a quite sensible step. When you look out beyond that to 2030, then I think it opens the doors potentially for other sources of chemical energy like hydrogen or whatever.
The sense of euphoria created by engine noise and vibration as cars flash by at 350 kilometers per hour. Well, it's the cherry on the cake for the die-hard F1 fan. But the direction of changes taking place may eventually lead to elimination of the F1 internal combustion drivetrain in favor of quieter alternatives. I asked Bob for his opinion on how coming technological changes might impact the die-hard fans that crave the sound of the current F1 cars.
Hydrogen still makes a pretty big bang when you
That's true.
You set it off. But aside from that, the die-hard fans will eventually die out because they're being replaced by younger followers of the sport. And in my experience, increasingly the younger generation of followers of Formula One, or just people who are interested in cars generally, are completely accepting of the fact that it's all going to get a lot quieter and that it's going to be a different world. And so I think that it will just happen naturally. The real die-hard guys will eventually grow old and pass on, and they'll be replaced by people who don't worry about that.
While we're on the topic of new fans, what happens outside of the racetrack is playing a greater role in generating new fans and keeping them engaged. I asked Bob about the impact of social media and of what happens outside of the racetrack and how it will influence the sport going forward.
Everyone likes social media. Everyone likes to watch Drive to Survive if you're an F1 fan. So there's an off-track element to a lot of this.
Yep.
How do you see that changing and growing?
Well, it's definitely going to grow, and I think it's very fair to say that one of the great things that Liberty has brought to the sport is this growth of building the sport's image and following outside of the racetrack. As you say, things like Drive to Survive and increased social media, and that really has brought a whole new audience to Formula One, particularly again the younger generation who wouldn't have given Formula One a second thought. But now they see the people behind the stories and the human conflict on and off the track. It's suddenly really awakened a whole new watching and following public, which is absolutely fantastic.
Keeping the sport relevant, competitive, and the number one priority, safe, is key to the survival of Formula One. The new regulations are certainly a step in the right direction, but what about Formula One plans for the future?
We do have a habit in this business of knee-jerk reactions to to perceived opinion. What I would say is that I think we need to give these regulations a chance, at least to the end of this year, to see what it genuinely has done. Look at the statistics, do the analytics, and decide whether or not they have worked. There is a mechanism, of course, on these cars which we haven't talked about, which is the DRS system, this drag reduction system that the drivers can use within a second of the car in front, which enables them to overtake more easily. We can adjust that. We can decide how often it's deployed, how powerful it is, all these things. So we have a tuning dial for allowing cars to overtake more easily, and we can adjust that fairly readily. So I would urge, let's see what happens this year. What we don't want to do is we don't want to go too far, particularly with something like the DRS system, where overtaking becomes artificial. Mm-hmm. It's just too easy. All you've got to do is get behind someone and you can overtake them. Well, is that racing? I'm not sure it is. I think you've got to work for it. I think we need to just be careful. So I would urge, let's see what happens this year, how it's perceived, what the results are, and then decide.
Bob experienced a lot of changes to Formula One throughout his career, and I was curious about what he would change next if he was given full reign of the F1 regulations.
Tear up the rule book, and the only rule you allow is it must fit within a box. It's that long, that wide.
Well, there you have it. I guess the greatest complexity lies in simplicity after all. I, for one, am humbled by Bob's expertise and his dedication to the sport. Whether you're a diehard fan or a newbie to F1, it becomes clear that there's never a dull moment in Formula One, and changes predicted for the future will add to the excitement of the world's most popular racing sport. I hope you've learned as much as I did from Bob today, and that you are just as amped to see your next F1 race and how Formula One may evolve in the years to come. Thanks for watching, and until next time.